Uh, man, this is fresh on my mind and on my heart, and I haven't had a lot of time to even process what's happened. I haven't had a lot of time to even understand my emotions around the death, the murder of George Floyd, um, who was a Houston native, a third ward native. Went to Jack Yates High School. Um, these are my stomping grounds, where my family's from, off Live Oak, and so there's so many layers to it. Obviously, there's a layer of just humanity, human dignity. He was made in the image of God. He's an image bearer. So he had infinite worth and value and didn't deserve to die at the hands of the police officers. So there's one level of just human dignity and human value that grieves my soul. That I want us to recognize that number one, he was an image bearer. He was a man made in the image of God, and so he had every right to breathe the air that we breathe and to be treated with dignity. Um, Number two, you know, him being a Houston native, him being connected to people. I know people who know this man. And so it's as if somebody that I could reach out and touch, it's as if somebody that I've come into contact with is now taken off this earth. And that drains me, right? That I'm tired of that. I'm tired of losing people. Already this year I've lost 3 people, and I'm just like, man, this is just a narrative that keeps repeating itself. And I think lastly, people, I'm not gonna sit here and do a discourse on race and racism or explain how race plays a part into this. That's on you to do your research on and to understand where and what that means. But it does. And if you would feel like, man, you causing problems or you creating tension and dissension, no, the dissension's already there. I'm just speaking about the reality that currently exists in this country. I find it ironic that Colin Kaepernick gets on one knee and is looked upon as one of the most hated individuals in America. And this police officer gets on one knee, takes a person's life, and people will try to figure out ways to explain it away or say, this is not about race. Or even in the comments, people will say, well, Colin did this and so on and so forth. And that's how I know it's not, that's not a battle worth engaging and fighting. So the question remains, what do we do? If you are grieved by this, what do you do? If you're not grieved, but you're perplexed, what do you do? And let me tell you, one, if you're grieved by this and you're fed up, your anger is just. Your anger is justified. You should be angry. You should be frustrated. You should be angry. You should be grieved. You should be hurt. It's what we do with that hurt. It's what we do with that pain that makes all the difference. There's a destructive way to use that emotion, and there's a constructive way to use that emotion. And my prayer that we would use it constructively, that we would employ prayer, policy, and programs, praying for those who are suffering because of the loss of George Floyd and others like him. Policy, making sure you vote, making sure you show up in the courthouse, making sure you are present to ensure that these laws are enforced, that these officers are in fact charged with murder for what they have done. And then lastly, programs. Get involved in local programs that help thwart this type of issue, where you can inform individuals, where you can inform people about the issues of disparity and injustice in our country. It's a fallen world. It's a broken world. And so as much as we like to think that everyone who's supposed to be a peace officer is going to protect and serve, it's a broken world. And so they're not all going to do that. They're not all going to be there. In the same token, this is not to bombast or say, hey, this is just the way officers are. This is just the way people of a certain race, white people, black, whatever. That's not to say that, but this is a real issue in our society. There's an issue of injustice. There's an issue of racism. There's an issue of power. And it showed its ugly face in this circumstance. And if you're not at all bothered by this, you should be. And I would ask you, you should probably pray that God would change your heart, that you would have empathy for those who are suffering at the hands of injustice and losing their lives. And lastly, I'll just leave you with this thought. If you are just in pain like I am, and you need to hold on to some hope and some realities, it's something I want to share that a good friend of mine, Pastor Albert Tate, reminded me of. Is I was in Israel, and I was out there in the Dead Sea. And if you know anything about the Dead Sea, the salt content is so high, you cannot sink. So no matter how heavy you are, no matter how far out, no matter how deep the water is, you are unable to sink. And similar to that, right now, this circumstance, this environment we in feels like the Dead Sea. It feels deep and far and overwhelming. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. People are being murdered. George Floyd was a human with rights and dignity who moved out to Minnesota to change his life and was accused of forgery. And even if he was guilty of forgery, that does not come with a death sentence. That's not here or there. We shouldn't have to justify anything or explain away anything for anybody. But if you are in the middle of this ocean, if you are feeling like you're drowning out here in this sea, I just want to encourage you and remind you that God's not going to let us sink, that the salt content is high and we will float. How? I don't know. How he'll do it, I don't know. But will he do it? He will. He's consistent. He keeps his promises. It's unfortunate and it's sad and it's heartbreaking, but we're clinging on to the reality that God has given us the wisdom, the understanding, and the tools to help each other float in the midst of this sea. God bless y'all, and praying for the family of George Floyd.